People who did it with coworkers. How did that turn out? I had a passionate affair with a 21-year-old new hire when I was 25. I had just bought a very expensive 160-acre farm with my girlfriend of 6 years. Things between us weren't great at the time, but it was her dream home. And since we were both earning good money, we decided to go for it rather than keep renting our tiny rundown house. In my line of work, we drive all over the state inspecting gas lines for oil companies, so the new girl and I spent most days on the road together, logging hundreds of miles before heading home each night. It started as harmless flirting, some teasing, playful pokes, and light arm punches. I was in great shape then, with a very high libido, while my girlfriend's had always been pretty low. She used to joke that one climax a month was enough for her. I wasn't a great communicator back then, and I never told her how much it frustrated me that we only slept together 2 or 3 times a month. The first time I cheated was just a kiss at work. Quick, on the lips. And I remember thinking, crap, I just cheated, and feeling awful for a couple of days. But that guilt soon gave way to late-night texts and intimate conversations. And from there, I couldn't stop myself. Then one day, on the way home from work, I took her to my parents' house when they weren't home, and she gave me a hand help. A week or 2 later, she wanted to actually do it, so I told my girlfriend I had to leave for work early and drove to her house at 4 a.m. It was so hot. The craziest thing was that my girlfriend started noticing my confidence was higher, and I stopped pursuing her at home, and she started wanting to be with me a lot more. Once that happened, I tried to slow things down with my coworker, but she wanted more. My girlfriend started to notice the tension between me and my coworker at work functions. We had a lot of BBQs on weekends and parties. One day after work, my girlfriend wanted to talk and I thought, oh crap, here we go. She found out. But she was actually mad because my coworker had posted a picture on Instagram of me holding a fish and wanted to know why I took her fishing. There was a pond behind our office with some fish in it, and one day during lunch, everyone tried to catch one. I just got lucky. Things went on like that for a while, but eventually I decided to leave my girlfriend. I moved in with a friend and kept seeing my coworker in secret for a few more months. After some time, she thought we should make our relationship Facebook official, but I wasn't ready, so we had a big fight, and she decided to move back to her home state. My ex never found out about the cheating, and I didn't face any consequences at work, so in the end, I basically got away with being a terrible person. Story 2. I was a young airman at my first base in California, and I worked with a girl named Sarah who was far more attractive than anyone I had ever been with before. For some reason, she was into me. She was also seeing a few other guys, but at the time that didn't matter because I was 19 and naive, and she was a few years older and much more experienced. We slept together a few times and sort of dated, but it never really went anywhere. I was heartbroken, but I handled it as best I could. This was right after 9/11 when U.S. military operations were starting to ramp up, and Sarah got deployment orders. They didn't tell her where she was going, but she was on the list. Her reaction was to tell our chief that she was pregnant with my child so she wouldn't have to go. I knew she wasn't pregnant and was just using it as an excuse not to deploy. The chief came to me and asked if I'd take her place. As I said, I was 19, and even though I was a little nervous, I signed the dotted line and told him, of course, I'll take the deployment. It turned out the deployment was to a NATO base in Naples, Italy, where I'd earn $80 per day in per diem on top of my regular paycheck. As soon as Sarah found out where I was headed, she called the chief and said she wasn't pregnant anymore and wanted to take the deployment after all. He denied her request, and I spent an incredible 8 months in Italy, earning more money than I knew what to do with and having the time of my life. Story 3. A coworker and I worked together for a couple of years and became close friends before we crossed the line into romance one night after a lot of drinks. Honestly, it was, and still is, amazing. We've been happily married for more than 15 years now and have 2 kids. Same here. We worked together at a bar and became friends while I was in college. We started dating, got married, and had 2 kids. Now, we work together again at the same company in our adult jobs, and we'll be celebrating 10 years of marriage next year. I have a similar story. We worked at a restaurant together. She even trained me when I started. We'd go out to bars with other co-workers regularly and became really good friends. After a few months, I drunkenly told her that I really liked her and wanted to date her. She said something along the lines of, "You're like my brother." My heart shattered, but I just went with it. It wasn't my first time in the friend zone. She knew how I felt, but we still hung out as friends. About 2 months later, she got promoted to management and was offered the chance to help open a new location in another city. One night after the bar, I told her I'd follow her home to make sure she got there safely. I always wait to see people get inside before leaving. This time, she came up to my car and asked, "Want to come in?" She later told me that on the way home, she thought, "He's nice. Maybe I'll give it a shot." That was in 2006, and we've been together ever since. Married for 13 years now, with 2 kids. I even followed her to the new city a few months after she moved. Story 4. I worked at a casino as the only male cocktail waiter and bartender. The floor was mostly women, between the bar staff, servers, restaurant crew, and dealers. I started seeing one of the cocktail waitresses for a couple of months, even though I knew I liked her more than she liked me. I also knew I didn't really want a relationship with her for a few reasons. Evidently, she told some people and gave me good reviews. After she left and moved away, I suddenly had more attention than I knew how to handle. So I just went with anyone I was attracted to who showed interest, knowing I'd be leaving within a year anyway. Over the next few months, I ended up seeing 4 more women from the casino, all at the same time. One night during a shift, I looked around and realized all 4 were on the floor somewhere. They all knew each other, but I don't think any of them knew about the others. There were no false impressions or promises of a relationship, so as far as I know, nothing bad came of it. Story 5. In my line of work, any kind of fraternization is strictly forbidden and guaranteed to get you fired if anyone finds out. Although I'd sometimes felt a spark with past colleagues, we always resisted the urge to act on it. Honestly, the fact that it was taboo only made it more exciting. That was until the day I met Luna. She was technically my superior, but since she was new, she had been assigned to me for training. From the first moment we met, there was a sparkle in those pretty brown eyes of hers, and I could tell she was going to be a flirt. The chemistry between us was incredible, and it didn't take long before our time together became the highlight of both our days. She made it pretty clear that she was interested, and frankly, I couldn't resist. It felt nice to be pursued, and before long, I let her catch me. All I can say is that our time together in bed was incredible. Everything I had been dreaming of. She had boundless energy and enthusiasm, and we explored things I had never tried before. But then, it all came crashing down. Our colleagues at work began to suspect something because of how we acted around each other. I tried to play it cool, but she wasn't afraid to show how excited she was to see me every day. I remember the day disaster struck. We had snuck off to a part of the compound that was usually empty and decided to have a little midday fun. But unfortunately, we were caught by about half a dozen colleagues, including our mutual superior. I'd always been raised with a strong moral compass, so when the investigation began, I felt it was the noble thing to do to take the blame and protect her. Honestly, I believed we'd be together forever by that point, no matter what. So I claimed I had made the first move, even though it wasn't true. That was when I learned she had family connections going back 2 generations, and it was clear there was an effort to shield her. I was accused by my superiors of aggressively pursuing her and taking advantage of her, and the rumors only grew uglier from there. She never defended me or corrected the lies, and I finally saw her for who she truly was. There was even talk of criminal charges at one point, but I think they simply wanted me to disappear quietly and help her avoid any hint of scandal. It had a big impact on my family, too. I was raised in a very strict religious household, and my parents have always been strongly opposed to any relationships outside of marriage. Since the news broke, they've refused to even discuss it with me and made it clear that they don't want me around. After that, I struggled to find another employer willing to take me on. Every organization in the area had heard about what happened and wouldn't even consider hiring me. After a very tough 18 months, I'm pleased to say that, although I had to move far across the country, I've managed to make a new start. While I still live with some anxiety that the past might catch up with me, I finally began working 3 weeks ago with a new K9 unit. Story 6. We had been flirting for weeks after she was hired. One evening, after we closed the store together, we were goofing around. She sprayed me with cleaner, and I chased her, grabbing her as we both fell to the floor laughing. Then we started kissing, and before we knew it, it was on. The aisle floor of a thrift store probably wasn't the best place to choose for that kind of thing, but we were young and foolish. We were still caught up in the moment when the front door opened and an older woman called out for her, asking if she was ready to go. We scrambled to get up, but it was too late. We were completely busted. It turned out to be her mom who had come to pick her up from work. Her mom didn't say a word about what she'd walked in on, she just told her to grab her things and get in the car. She got in trouble at home, and her parents made her quit right away. They never told anyone what happened, so nothing came back on me at work. We didn't really see each other after that, though we ran into each other in college years later and had a good laugh about it. If only we'd locked the door like we were supposed to. Story 7. We dated for 3 months before I realized I needed to end things. Looking back, I think I only asked her out because all I did was work, and she just happened to be there. At 18, fresh out of high school and not getting out much beyond my roommates and coworkers, it feels like I dated her more out of convenience than genuine interest. She was hurt, and I'll admit, I handled it badly. I broke up with her over the phone right before her shift. Definitely not my best moment. Things were awkward for about a week, but since we worked opposite shifts, we barely saw each other anyway. One day, she texted me saying she'd been to the doctor and found out she was 6 weeks pregnant. My whole world stopped. Being only 18, I was terrified. She asked if we could get back together, but I was honest and told her I didn't want to be in a relationship just because a kid might be involved. Things were messy for about a month with almost no communication. Then I got a text from her saying, "Don't worry, I had a miscarriage. You're all good." Trust me, the tone behind that message was definitely passive-aggressive. About a week later, her best friend, who she eventually had a bad falling out with, told me the pregnancy had been a lie, just an attempt to get me back. I didn't know what to believe until my ex called, begging me not to tell our coworkers. I hadn't planned to anyway. I was done with the whole situation. It didn't end up mattering much, though. She got fired a few days later for her till being short $100. Story 8. We had an instant connection the moment she joined the foundation where I'd been working for a year. We both worked at the front desk and got to know each other quickly. Neither of us had much patience for small talk, and we'd often get angry emails from our unbelievably incompetent manager about how much laughter was coming from the front desk. We always got our work done, and then some, but our manager seemed to feel left out, which, to be fair, she was, mostly because she wasn't great at her job. Before my new coworker started, I worked from home 4 days a week. A few weeks in, she asked why I was suddenly coming in every day. I told her it was to help train her on how to answer the phones, but she saw right through that excuse. The first time we hung out outside of work, we agreed that dating would be a terrible idea. That lasted about 10 days. The next time we hung out, we slept together, and that was a year and a half ago. We left the foundation after she emailed our manager saying her management style was untenable. After that, the two of us called a meeting with her and presented a carefully planned strategy for departmental growth and change. Our manager nodded along the entire time, telling us how proud she was that we were taking ownership of our careers and how excited she was to put our plan into action. 3 weeks later, they fired my coworker. Not long after, they pushed me out too, saying there was no longer a place for me, despite the fact that during my review the previous year, the CEO had told me she believed I had CEO potential. We both have new jobs now. She's a high school English teacher at one of the best schools in the country, and I'm working as a private investigator. Her dad and I go to college football games together, and our moms meet up for lunch and spa days. We've been helping each other heal and grow, both as individuals and as partners. Right now, she's asleep in my bedroom while I'm typing this from the living room. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I do know that she's the love of my life. Sleeping with my coworker turned out to be the best decision I've ever made. Story 9. We started as friends with benefits, and then she began making me mozzarella sticks every day, right when I came in. A 22-year-old hungover idiot who basically ran on those cheesy, delicious things. Classic server meets kitchen person story, just with the roles reversed. 9 years later, we have 2 kids, a 6-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, and we're thriving. But I still love telling the story of how I fell in love with my wife, even if she's tired of hearing it by now. When we met, it was at the 7th busiest Buffalo Wild Wings in the country. I had lied about having serving experience, but I came with a great reference, so they hired me anyway. I was constantly getting slammed, And my wife, Kay, was the kitchen manager who had to deal with my daily, sometimes hourly, screw-ups. To her, I was the loud, cocky server messing up her kitchen. To me, she was the snarky kitchen lady who gave me grief, but somehow made the place a lot more fun. At the time, I was living in an absolutely clapped-out apartment. 3 rooms, 5 guys. One of us even used the master bedroom closet as his sleeping area. We were all 21 once, so don't judge. 3 of us worked together, and everyone knew our place was the spot after work or after the bars closed if you wanted to drink, smoke, or just generally be a degenerate. 6 months went by, and I started to get my life together, working hard, figuring things out, and learning to ask for help when I needed it. Anyone in the industry knows exactly what I mean. By then, Kay and I were cordial at best, nowhere near friends. So imagine my surprise one night when I'm sitting at home and my roommate walks in, with Kay right behind him. Our first conversation outside of work went something like this. She said, "The heck are you doing here?" And I replied, "Girl, I live here. What are you doing in my house?" A fantastic start, honestly. It turned out we both liked cheap whiskey, dubstep, and backpacking. And just like that, we became friends. I paid a little extra for the one single room in the house, and one night, Kay had a bit too much to drink. She'd pretty much become part of the squad by then. She lived about 35 minutes away and wasn't driving, so she asked, "Which side of the bed do you sleep on?" I looked at her and went, "Excuse me?" She repeated herself, and I said, "Yeah, no, we're friends, but not that kind of friends." She gave me the biggest, "Are you serious right now?" look and said, "I'm not driving, and I'm definitely not hooking up with you, but I'm also not sleeping on the couch or in one of the split rooms in a house full of dudes. We can build a pillow wall or just be adults about it." Sure enough, she passed out, and I went to bed a while later and did the same. It happened a few more times before one night we were both still awake, talking. The topic of casual hookups came up, and it kind of turned into, why not? So we did the deed and agreed. Maybe again, sometime. Then once every other week turned into every week, which turned into, okay, you basically live here. I knew I was getting attached when one of my other hookups texted me, and I said, "Nah, we're good. I think Kay's coming over." In my head, I was panicking. Crap, does that mean I actually like her? Not long after, one of the guys and I moved into our own place, and shortly after that, Kay moved in too. Kay had been on birth control since she was 15, and it really messed her up. She hadn't had a period in 5 years. So when we became official, it was like, all right, no need for protection. We're together, we've both tested negative for anything, and your doctor said you can't get pregnant. About a year went by, and we fell hard for each other. We even started talking about having kids someday when we were ready. Then her breasts started hurting, and she was scared it might be cancer. Turns out it was milk glands. A total miracle. But we were only 21 and 23, and suddenly it was like, what the heck are we going to do? So we sat down and made a plan. No booze, no raves. Every spare dollar would go to diapers and baby stuff. Somehow, it looked like it would work. It was hard, really hard. But every low point we hit has been completely eclipsed by the highs. We have a little brother now too. That journey wasn't easy. She had 2 miscarriages before we finally got lucky about 5 years later. Now, Big Brother has a best friend for life. During COVID, we adopted a dog. And about a year ago, we bought our first house. I got snipped, so no more kids, and now we can enjoy ourselves without any worries. All in all, we've been together for about 9 years, depending on when you start counting our story. It's been a ride, but I love that woman with all my heart, no matter how much of a hard-headed pain in the butt she can be sometimes. I'm the same way, so I guess we were meant for each other. Story 10. A guy I knew, Brandon, was a manager at a grocery store chain, and I went to his birthday party with some friends. My girlfriend worked at the same grocery store as Brandon. She was a cashier, but hadn't gone to the party and asked who was there the next morning. I mentioned a few people we both knew, and a new girl, Amy, whom I met, and who was with Brandon. It turned out Amy also worked at the store as a bagger and had some cognitive challenges. The situation became a major issue because my then-girlfriend told everyone, and within a couple of days, Brandon was fired after others at the store found out. He blamed me for everything, saying I wasn't controlling my girl. The lesson: Don't sleep with anyone who reports to you at work. That said, I've known plenty of people who've hooked up with coworkers, and I did the same myself in my teens and early 20s. In my view, sleeping with a coworker isn't much different from dating someone at school. It brings all the same complications that come with overlapping social circles. Story 11. I had only been with the company for 6 months when I developed a crush on a coworker who seemed to like me back. We exchanged a few innocent messages, nothing serious. Then came a large industry event where I got absolutely drunk and started flirting with him. I don't remember exactly how, but suddenly we were kissing in front of everyone. Neither of us cared, and we left together. The next morning was awkward as heck, so I left. But that evening, we started messaging again, and it was clear he liked me and didn't want it to be just a one-time thing. Neither of us had any real relationship experience, but we both seemed to want the same thing. About a month and a half later, we made it official. He became my first boyfriend. 7 months after that, we moved in together. And this month marks a year and a half since we started dating. I love him to death. It's honestly the best dumb decision I ever made. We're both still working at the same company. Story 12. The first was an odd fling. She was very flirty and openly carnal over text, and we had a few good times in bed over a few months. We agreed to keep it a secret, and at work you'd never have known we'd ever spoken. No eye contact, barely a word exchanged. It was strange, really, but that silence eventually broke down, and things just faded away. The second was intense. We didn't make it public at work, though people close to us knew. She was great in bed, and over time, real feelings started to grow. We shared flirty messages and deep, meaningful conversations. We might have actually become something more if not for the circumstances. I was a 22-year-old guy still living with my parents and without any real responsibilities, while she was a 28-year-old woman still married but separated, with a child trying to rebuild her life. We lived in different worlds. I look back on that time with fondness. I've never met anyone with energy like hers since. I miss that in a way. The third is now my fiancé. We were assigned to the same project and things developed naturally from there. She's my entire world, and I love her with every fiber of my being. Story 13. I got a job at my girlfriend's workplace, so I don't count that as a workplace relationship since we were already dating. I was the assistant manager at a major retail chain, and one associate started flirting with me. I flirted back, and we spent a lot of time together outside of work. She once hooked up with one of my friends, but when it became clear I was leaving the job, she decided to give her 2 weeks' notice as well. The next time we worked together, we ended up making out in the employee bathroom, and later we slept together at her place. It was fun, but it never happened again. I think the thrill came from the fact that it was forbidden. While working at a restaurant, I was joking with some coworkers about a dry spell I was going through, and one coworker said, "I can help you with that." I went to her place after work, and we had a pretty mediocre time. It only happened once, and she later started dating the bartender. I didn't hook up with anyone at my last job, but within my coworker friend group, there were 3 committed relationships. 2 of those couples ended up getting married, and I'm fairly certain the third will too. So, workplace relationships don't always end in disaster. Story 14. My first job was at McDonald's. I started seeing a girl B, whom I worked with for a little while. She used to sneak me into her room a couple of times a week. We did everything but sleep together for quite some time before it finally happened. Afterwards, I was lying there, completely content and basking in the afterglow, when B suddenly told me she wanted me to take her to the mall. I was confused. There I was, happy, just holding her like every romantic comedy had told me I was supposed to be, and she picked that exact moment to bring up the mall. I said, "Sure, I guess. I'd like to lie here with you a while longer first, though." That's when she sat up, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "I did what you wanted to do." It felt so transactional. Any illusion of romance dropped with a thud at the foot of the bed. I didn't know what to say. I just felt dirty somehow. So we went to the mall. Afterwards, I kind of spun out a bit. I mean, what the heck was that? I was a hopeless romantic, already assigning way more meaning to things than was probably there. It was clear this wasn't going to work. I had to break up with her. The very next day, another girl, A, called me. I'd had a crush on her for months. She was the same girl who'd been playing my girlfriend in the school play. She asked if we could hang out, so I took her to Dairy Queen. It was nice, but I didn't think much of it at the time. On the way back, A mentioned that she'd broken up with her boyfriend. Interesting, sure, but I figured she was just making conversation. Then she brought up the rap party we'd just been to. She hadn't played spin the bottle with the rest of us because she'd brought her boyfriend. She said the girls had kept talking about what a good kisser I was. In my head, I was like, oh, well, that's nice to hear. But then it hit me. She couldn't stop thinking about what it might be like to kiss me. Well, that was new. I've never been great at reading signals, but I hardly needed a singing crustacean to tell me what to do. I kissed that girl. It was everything I imagined it would be, and judging by her reaction, it didn't disappoint on her end either. She wanted to hang out some more, and I wasn't about to argue. Naturally, we went to one of the few places there were to go in our small town, the mall. Now, you may recall that someone else was rather fond of the mall. B was less than thrilled to see A and me together, but she didn't seem too surprised. She'd already figured out we were probably breaking up, and she was probably right. Story 15. I work at a personal training gym, and our front desk associate and I always had a bit of tension. We got along really well at work, but we never talked or texted outside of work unless it was about something job-related. After about a year of working together, she said, "We should hang out sometime." Not in, like, a weird way. And then started stammering over her words. I laughed and said, "Yeah, sure." Normally, I have a strict boundary about work flings and avoid them at all costs, so nothing happened for a while after that. Then, a few months later, she hit me up again and invited me to hang out, but I made up some lame excuse because I still wasn't sure it was a good idea. Things went on as usual after that. Then, finally, a few months ago, I was out bar hopping with some friends and ended up texting her. She happened to be out nearby, so I invited her to come meet up with us. She did. We partied for a while, started getting closer, then came some flirty touching, then kissing, and eventually we ended up back at her apartment and slept together. More than once that night. Since then, we've only hung out a few times. At work, we've kept things professional, but there's still that quiet, flirty energy between us. It's kind of fun having a little secret. So far, nothing's gone wrong. And honestly, it's all turned out pretty great. Story 16. I'll call the woman I shared a passionate, blossoming love with Sandra, and the other woman I had no relations with Lee. I was working at a company, and there was this woman named Sandra who would always stare at me whenever we passed each other. She wouldn't smile. It was more like she wanted to talk but was too shy. So she'd just look at me with this intense, almost searching gaze. Over time, we started exchanging a few words whenever we crossed paths. Each brief conversation seemed to build more energy between us, like the air got a little warmer every time. Eventually, I stopped her one day and said, "Let's go on a date." When I tell you she looked excited, I mean really excited. She said yes immediately, and from then on reminded me almost every day about our upcoming date. Each time we talked, we added a new little detail to what we'd do that day, building it up together piece by piece. On the day of our date, we went to the park, watched films on the grass, went hiking, drove around, and simply enjoyed being together. It felt pure, and at the same time, we were deeply connected on every level. We did it 4 or 5 times that day, for a total of about 8 hours. We planned a few more dates afterward, but a major incident at work ruined everything. A few days later, another woman named Lee complained to some female coworkers that I mostly talk to women at work. I have trust issues with other men, so I tend to avoid them, though I am learning to build brotherly connections. Lai and 2 of her friends accused me of flirting with several women, which wasn't true. I just had many female coworkers I got along with. The woman who complained actually liked me, and when I didn't return her interest, she spread that rumor. It grew quickly, and eventually an older female coworker whom Lee had told yelled at me and called me worthless trash for something I didn't do. I was fired that same day by HR, and a report was written about me based on complaints from 3 women, Lai and her 2 best friends, who worked together to get me dismissed. That was around 6 years ago, but now I believe I may be barred from getting work, especially at major tech companies, since finding a new job has been extremely difficult. Still, I continue to try. On the day the incident happened, Sandra found out and later messaged me to say that we were done, without even asking me in person if what she heard was true. That ended our relationship very abruptly and became the final reason I stopped trusting anyone at work. I have no idea how Sandra is doing now, but I hope she is living her best life. She was so bubbly, and we connected effortlessly in every way. We had an amazing time the day we made love, and I was genuinely excited to see where life might take us. But it just wasn't meant to be. Story 17. This happened some time ago at a work conference I attended with several coworkers. One of the women I got along with best was there as well. I'm not sure if we would fit the work wife and work husband label, but we definitely had a strong rapport. We were partnered to give a presentation and needed to prepare our material the night before, so we ordered some food and decided to meet in my hotel room to get everything ready. As we were working on the presentation, she suddenly asked, "Do you think I'm ugly?" The question caught me completely off guard. I told her honestly that she wasn't. In fact, she was quite attractive. She had recently given birth and mentioned feeling self-conscious about gaining some weight, though it wasn't very noticeable. She explained that she and her husband hadn't been as intimate since the baby arrived, and it had affected her confidence. I reassured her and said, "If you want my honest opinion, I think you're a very attractive woman. Honestly, if you weren't married, I might even consider pursuing you." She looked at me and replied, "Prove it," before leaning in and kissing me. I knew I shouldn't have gone along with it. She had a husband and a child, but in that moment, I let impulse take over, and we were intimate that night. Afterward, we both felt a deep sense of guilt. She quietly got up, said, "This was a mistake," and left the room. I didn't see her again until the presentation the next day, which, surprisingly, went smoothly, despite everything that had happened. After that night, my relationship with her changed drastically. It became obvious enough that some coworkers even noticed and asked about it, but I brushed it off and said nothing. Eventually, she left the company and later blocked me on all social media. I haven't spoken to her since. The last I heard, through a mutual friend, is that she's still working at that other company and is now pregnant with another child. So either she told her husband and they managed to work things out, or she chose to keep that secret to herself. Story 18. I've been with a few coworkers in my life, and I recently had a 2-day fling with someone from a brand new part-time job I just started. I'm 34, and he's 26, younger than I'm usually comfortable with. I held out for a while, but he's incredibly charming, persistent, and confident, not to mention very cute. The other day, I finally asked if he wanted to meet up for drinks. Let's just say we had 2 days of wild, anything-goes passion that barely stopped. It was amazing. Still, I made one mistake. I let him stay over instead of having him leave. Rule number 1 of keeping things casual is to part ways once it's over. I did make it clear that I wasn't looking for anything beyond a good time. We eventually lay down to sleep. A little while later, my roommate came home, so I got up and went to hang out for a bit. My roommate had brought a friend along, someone who turned out to be quite cute and clearly interested in me. I flirted a little, but nothing too obvious. Meanwhile, my coworker stayed in my room with the door closed, so I doubt he heard much of our conversation. Still, not long after, he got up, called a lift, and left. I thought about texting him to apologize if he felt unwelcome, but in the end, I reminded myself that I'd been upfront about what this was. Unfortunately, it seems he caught feelings. I plan to text him before we see each other at work again, just to make things a little less awkward. Not too long ago, I also had a drunken hookup with a coworker from my full-time job. We're really good friends, and I often crash at his place after a night of drinking. Usually nothing happens because I fall asleep the moment I hit the bed, but one night, we started cuddling, and things just naturally progressed from there. It was good. I'd even say I was the star performer that night. He's a few years older than me, so I don't worry about either of us catching feelings. We're open with each other about our other partners, and it's clear that we're just friends who had a moment. Nothing more. Story 19. When I was in my early 20s, I was a virgin and unknowingly trapped in an emotionally toxic 5-year relationship that began as a live-in arrangement and later became long distance. My partner didn't respect that I was unhappy, and anytime I brought up couples therapy or suggested that we might be better off apart, they would become extremely upset and sometimes threaten to harm themselves. Because of that, I couldn't bring myself to leave. During that period, I started thinking more about polyamory, wondering how wonderful it would be if people could simply love freely, without drama or jealousy. Around the same time, there was a kind coworker who had just gone through a breakup after a 4-year relationship that had also been unhappy. We bonded quickly and talked about everything, eventually touching on the topic of polyamory. To my surprise, they were open to the idea, given my situation. I later spoke to my long-distance partner, explained everything, and we agreed that maybe exploring that dynamic could be a good thing. Then the problems began once the two of them met online. My coworker started pointing out how poorly my long-distance partner was treating me and broke down every instance in detail. Suddenly, things I had grown used to shrugging off or minimizing became impossible to ignore. I realized I had been disrespected, used, and emotionally manipulated. The sad part is, I don't think my long-distance partner was even fully aware of how much harm they were causing. They had grown up in a deeply dysfunctional family and were only repeating what they knew. At that point, I didn't know what to do. My coworker and I had built an incredible bond, and for the first time in years, I felt genuinely loved and valued. Still, after everything I had been through with my long-distance partner, leaving felt like a terrible thing to do. But I knew I had to. So I did. And in the end, it turned out to be the right choice. My coworker and I are still together, and we're blissfully happy. It truly worked out for the best. Story 20. I worked at a restaurant and hooked up with a girl who also worked there. She got way too attached too quickly for my liking, but she understood when I told her I wanted to end things. As I was walking home after ending it with her, another coworker messaged me asking what I was up to. That led to her coming over, and our fling lasted about 8 months. It wasn't until the end of the first month that I found out she actually had a boyfriend who lived 8 hours away. Stupidly, I believed her every time she said she'd break up with him the next time she saw him in person. I finally ended things after 8 months because she never broke up with her boyfriend. She slept with her ex over Christmas break, and I felt awful about the whole situation. Then, a year later, still working at the same restaurant, I hooked up with the owner's daughter, who was about my age. No one ever found out, but I decided to leave and work elsewhere. Everyone already knew about the 2 coworkers I'd been involved with, and I couldn't stand the thought of the owner discovering this. Last one. A few years later, when I came back to visit, the owner and I were still on good terms. He even offered me a chance to invest in his next business venture. All in all, no lasting negatives, some drama, definitely some trauma from helping someone cheat, and a lot of life lessons learned. Story 21. I was an executive for a company once, the kind of salary most people never see and bonuses that bordered on obscene, all before I turned 30. The sky was the limit, and I was exceptionally good at what I did. Headhunters wouldn't stop trying to recruit me. The offers came constantly. My downfall came courtesy of my own stupidity. Word got back to HR that I'd been sleeping around with a number of female employees, none of them my direct reports or even in my chain of command, and also with the spouse of a male employee. That earned me a visit to the office of an HR generalist, who told me it was over between us because, despite having a husband at home, she thought our fling meant something. About a week later, the other HR generalist I was still sleeping with found out about the first one and reported me to the company president. She conveniently left out that she'd also been involved with me. I was politely told to stop fishing off the company dock. On my way out of the office, I noticed the president's new intern. That weekend, I took her to a nice hotel resort and we had a blast. I was asked to resign shortly after. I missed that job, but I wouldn't change a thing. I've made a living playing poker since leaving, and while I don't make nearly as much as I used to, that's fine. Nobody needs to make that kind of money, especially me. Because right now, I'm actually a decent human being. The only thing that ever separated me from being a full-blown Bond villain was financial resources. And I know that from experience. Sleeping around at work wasn't the only way my madness showed back when I had what felt like unlimited money. I also did copious amounts of powder and acted like a jerk in general. Story 22. I'm active duty Navy, and at the time this happened, I was stationed on an aircraft carrier in the engineering department. The department splits into divisions, and for the sake of keeping this story moving, damage control is manned mostly by damage controlmen. I don't know what was going on with that part of engineering, but it felt like every week someone from the DC division was getting sent up to captain's mast for fraternization. For real, those people just could not stop sleeping with each other. About a week after we pulled out of Spain, I started noticing one of the female DCs passing through the male engineering lounge a lot, usually after hours. I didn't think much of it at first, since to get to her shop you had to go through one of 2 male lounges. I figured she was just heading down there to watch movies or use the computer. She was never in uniform, always in pajamas, every time she walked through. The only thing that really caught my attention was how often she was making those trips to the DC shop. What made it even stranger was that sometimes I never saw her leave. Flash forward a few weeks. It's late and I'm in the lounge shooting the breeze with my buddies before we go on watch. The watertight door at the back of our space opens, and in walks almost the entire security department. They move straight toward the vestibule that leads to the DC shop. A few minutes later, 2 security personnel come back through, escorting the female DC-3 in handcuffs, presumably taking her to the security office. Right after she goes through the hatch, 4 or 5 more security personnel come in, this time escorting the most jacked DC-1 on the ship. Turns out, the first class and the third class had been romantically involved for a while before this. They only got caught completely by coincidence. In the DC locker, we kept these giant bags that held entire firefighting ensembles, and we had plenty to spare. So DC-1 and DC-3 decided to clear out the furthest corner of the locker, steal 2 mattresses from the engineering berthing, and set up what was basically a tiny hidden apartment behind a wall of firefighting bags. They even rerouted one of the speaker boxes from a different space so they could hear announcements in case of a casualty. That way, they could crawl out and pretend like they'd been working the whole time. Their mistake came during a routine zone inspection. A chief happened to notice a little black cable snaking through a pile of firefighting gear and decided to follow it. As you can imagine, that led straight to their hideout, and to both of them getting caught. The first class was demoted to second class and discharged from the Navy. The DC-3 was reduced to fireman, and she had a baby on the way. Yes, she got pregnant. But to answer the question, how did that turn out? Honestly, surprisingly well. She had the baby, the 2 of them got married, bought a house, and now seem to be living happily ever after. I'm genuinely happy for them. They were both good people, and I used to talk with them pretty often while stationed on the carrier. These days, I still see pictures of them together, looking happy, thriving, and living their best lives. Story 23. We tried dating for about 8 months, but she turned out to be a pathological liar and incredibly dramatic. She might have been bipolar or something because we'd have these stretches where everything felt perfect, really happy, really connected. And then she'd just wake up one day and break up with me out of nowhere. Then she'd cry until I took her back, promising she'd do better this time. A few weeks later, after catching her in a dozen more lies, she'd dump me again and tell me she'd been faking everything, that she couldn't keep up with all the lies she had to tell just to be with me. I'd tell her I'd really appreciate it if she'd just stop lying and be herself. Then came the crying, the begging, another long talk about honesty, and we'd be right back where we started. Eventually, I just got bored with the whole cycle. I wanted to live my life and not spend every waking hour talking about the relationship. That's when things really went downhill. We worked together for about a year afterward, and it felt like she was watching everything I did. One time, I mentioned to a coworker that I was thinking about getting a treadmill. When I got back to my desk, there was a 2-paragraph message waiting for me about how I only wanted one because I used to use hers, and that I'd apparently dated her just for access to it. She lied about me to everyone and tried to turn people against me, just endless drama. Eventually, we both got new jobs, and that was the end of it. We never spoke again. Story 24. I once slept with a new coworker at the bar where I worked as a barman. I don't know what happened exactly, but from our very first shift together, there was this crazy intense connection. I'm not a flirty person at all, but with her, everything just fell into place. The whole night felt like a slow, teasing buildup to something everyone could see coming. And after closing, we ended up hooking up in the storage room. She was a great tease, but a terrible server, and didn't make it through her trial period. After that, we never saw or heard from each other again. I'm now the general manager of a pretty large place with a big team full of beautiful people who all get along really well. I try to keep my nose out of everyone's business, but sometimes I wish people would stop sleeping with each other. 9 times out of 10, it just leads to drama. Someone gets mad because they slept with the same person, or someone has a crush on someone else, but another person ends up in their bed, and all hell breaks loose. As long as it doesn't happen on the clock, I don't really see it as any of my business. But if the consequences of people hooking up start spilling onto the work floor, that's when I step in. Usually, a simple talk is enough to sort things out, but sometimes people end up having to leave the company because they can't make peace. When coworkers start dating, I always tell them the same thing. I don't want to see any of it at work. I'm happy for them, but if they break up and can't work together afterward, one of them will have to go. Story 25. I was about 8 years older than her and a new joiner at the company. It was October, moving into the festive season. We'd shared some good conversations and more than once, a tube ride to our respective homes. This was a couple of years ago, when masks on the underground were still mandatory, and so much of what we said lived in our eyes. I remember asking if she was bringing anyone to the company's Christmas and launch party. After a short pause, she met my gaze, blue-gray eyes, steady on mine, and said no in a way that felt deliberate. I'll admit, I probably shouldn't have taken it any further than I did. And to be clear, we didn't sleep together, but we did make some progress in that direction. There's nothing quite like the quiet thrill of taking your beautiful coworker in your arms at the end of a night, both of you fully aware of how much you want each other, and how foolish it would be to let that go any further. It didn't lead anywhere long term. We're still friends, and now work at different companies. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't still interested, at least in a general sort of way. But it's probably for the best that we left things at those 2 evenings of momentary indiscretion. Story 26. When I was 19, I worked a warehouse job and had a fling with a coworker. It was fun while it lasted, but when we broke up, it was awful. I already hated that job, so quitting was an easy decision. In my late 20s, my wife and I ended up working at the same place. Thankfully, I left for a better job before we separated and eventually divorced. At that job, we were friends with our manager and would go to her place for parties, weekends, New Year's, that kind of thing, usually with several other coworkers. Things got messy. I ended up sleeping with 2 coworkers and the manager, while my wife had her first 2 lesbian experiences during those same parties. None of us work at that corporate office anymore. I had an affair with a married coworker. It was a mind-numbingly dull job, and some coworkers were jealous of our not-so-secret relationship. Others had clear issues with it because she was married. A few even had problems with it because I'm white and she's black. The worst part about sleeping with coworkers is that everyone ends up knowing everything, especially when the job is dull and repetitive. That's exactly where gossip thrives. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.